Hey guys, tonight, we're heading north farther than roads go past the last tree line, into a place where the snow doesn't melt and the stars feel close enough to brush your fingers against. You're wrapped in thick furs that still smell faintly of the reindeer they came from. Your boots crunch in the glittering crust of ice, and your breath puffs out in quick silver clouds that vanish before you can even admire them. The wind cuts sideways across the tundra, sharp and alive like it has opinions. The horizon is a white smear sky, and land blending into one long inhale. And somewhere ahead, a fire is burning. But this isn't just any fire. It's a shadow fire, built not for warmth, but for revelation. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The snow crunches beneath your knees as you lower yourself onto a fur-lined mat beside the fire. It's not big, not roaring, just enough flame to dance low and blue over a stack of driftwood and dried whale tendon. The shaman sitting across from you, face painted with soot and snow ash, leans forward and places a smooth bone across the fire's edge. It's carved with little notches like a tally or a song frozen in ivory, and when the flames shift, those notches cast shadows long and strange onto a stretched hide behind the fire. You stare at them. They flicker, but not randomly. They move with intention. They slide left pulse, then scatter into spines and hooks. You blink. The shaman doesn't. You've entered the Hall of Winds, not an actual hall mind. You just a name passed down through oral tradition, because this is where messages arrive when the wind refuses to use words. Across the Arctic, shamans were often wind watchers, not meteorologists, not in the modern satellite sense, but readers of what can't be touched. They'd observe how snowdrifts curled, how smoke refused to rise, how birds flew low, or not at all. But most of all, they read shadows, especially the ones that firelight stretched thin across fur, ice, or bone. Because in those shadows, they said the wind left its script. And here you are, watching that script unroll in wavering silhouettes that look like bird wings one moment, antlers the next. You try to guess what it means. The shaman hums softly low and throaty, like a throat-sung lullaby that never quite resolves. You realize they're not waiting for you to see anything. They're waiting for you to listen with your eyes. The fire crackles. The wind stirs. A shadow sharpens, suddenly hooked and curling like a question mark. Storm, the shaman says, voice barely audible over the shifting gusts outside. You frown? It's clear right now. But the shaman shakes their head. Not yet, but soon. The wind has changed bones. You try to ask what that means, but your lips feel slow, like the cold is numbing even your questions. So instead, you watch, and you learn. The shadows shift again. This time, the smoke bends sideways, and the flame dips, not blown by wind, but pulled. Somehow, like gravity itself, tilted a little. The shaman stands. They pluck a strand of woven sinew from a pouch, wet it with melted snow, and stretch it over 2 sticks. It hums faintly, vibrates when held near the fire. That's the wind's echo, they murmur. Now it would be very easy to dismiss this all as theatrics, as symbolism. But here's a fact: among the Inuit Evenki and other Arctic peoples, wind direction and air pressure weren't just about weather. They were about survival, knowing which wind would bring the caribou or the polar bear, which gusts would open a crevasse or seal a trail. Wind wasn't background noise, it was a compass. And here's the quirky part. Some Arctic shamans used to drill tiny holes into whalebone flutes, not to play music, but to catch specific wind tones, like little breath analyzers for the spirits. Historians still argue whether these were religious tools or survival aids. The shaman says aloud, as if reading your mind, "But what is survival if not sacred?" The shadows have stilled now. The fire gutters and the shaman covers it with snow. No smoke, no ash, just silence. You step outside and find the stars sharper than before the cold cleaner. The wind is still moving, but now you notice how. from the southeast. With short, low bursts, like someone sighing through clenched teeth. You understand a little better now. This isn't magic, and it isn't just science. It's attention. It's the art of paying enough attention to the invisible until it makes itself known. You trudge back toward the camp, the snow crunching differently now, as if it too has things to say. And somewhere in the distance, a second fire flickers. Maybe another shaman, maybe another story, maybe just someone else trying to read the sky. You wake slowly to the sound of fabric shifting fur against fur, like someone wrapping themselves tightly before stepping out into the wind. The tent is dim, the light filtering through the stitched sealskin stretched taut above your head. It smells like smoked fish, old fire, and something sharp, pine tar maybe, or birch ash. You sit up, the cold immediately biting your cheeks. The shaman is already gone. Outside, the world is still blue with early dawn. That soft, bruised kind of blue that makes everything seem deeper, older, quieter. You step out, and there they are, silhouetted against the snow ridge arms, raised facing the wind. No fire this time, just shadows, cast not from flame but from the slanted morning light. The sun hasn't cleared the horizon yet, but it's trying, stretching long fingers across the ice. And those fingers, they're painting shadows behind the shaman's feet, behind the ridge lines, behind you, elongated, flickering. You step closer, trying not to disturb the moment. The snow crunches beneath your feet like dry paper, and you swear the wind hushes in warning. The shaman doesn't move but speaks without turning. Look down, they say. You do, and your shadow is strange. It isn't just long, it bends, hooks, curves, left, while your body tilts right. The shaman points to their own, a tall figure sliced by slashes of windblown snow. Their shadow ripples, then splits, not in two, in three. You see it. You hesitate. Yes and no. I see lines you offer. The shaman hums. Good enough. You sit with them on the ridge watching as the sun slowly stretches over the land. Shadows begin to collapse, shorten. But while they last, the shaman reads them. Not like tea leaves, not in the cozy fortune cookie way. More like a navigator reading currents in ink. Here's something not often taught in textbooks. Arctic shamans believed that the wind had not just direction, but mood. That a playful wind made light shadows. A hunting wind cast deep slashes. And a grieving wind, that one made your shadow look like it was weeping. Historians still argue whether shadow reading was metaphor or measurement, the shaman says. But then again, they don't live where the ice moans at night. A low gust rushes past, lifting your hood. Your own shadow, now clearer, looks oddly bird-like, arms, tucked, neck curved. What does that mean? The shaman shrugs. Depends on the day. That's how it is out here. No carved rules, no rigid charts, just constant interpretation. A daily dance with the invisible. The shaman tells you the story of Kirik, a legendary wind reader who could tell how many caribou were coming by, the way his shadow lay across a broken antler. He once saved a whole village, they add, just by refusing to fish on a Tuesday. You raise an eyebrow. Because of a shadow? No, because the wind told him the shadow was lying. That's the twist, apparently. Shadows could deceive, especially when the wind wanted them to. It's not about seeing a shape and assigning it a meaning. It's about listening to the whole scene. The light, the snow, the feel of the air in your teeth. It's a symphony, and the shadows are just the sheet music. Misread them, and the whole tune collapses. You sit quietly now, trying to absorb that. The shaman pulls a thin length of bone from their pouch, carved flat like a ruler, but smoothed on one side. They lay it gently in the snow, angling it toward the light. After a few seconds, a shallow shadow appears beneath it. Almost not there. Just a blur. But the shaman leans in, nods solemnly, then traces a half circle in the snow around it. That's the arc of turning wind, they explain. We'll have a reversal by dusk. Sure enough, the trees in the far distance are already rustling, towards you, not away. It's so subtle, you wouldn't have noticed. But now you see it. A fringe tale comes to mind about shamans who walked backward at dawn, trailing cords of braided horsehair, watching how the wind tugged them. If the shadows of those cords formed an X before sunrise, they'd declare a taboo: no hunting, no fire making, no unnecessary speech. It sounds extreme, until you learn those days often preceded blizzards. You glance at your hands. How thin their shadows are now. How uncertain? You ask, what happens when there's no shadow at all? The shaman smiles, half mischief, half melancholy. Then you ask your breath. That's not metaphor. In certain Arctic regions, elders claimed that your breath could lie too. If it curled upward, unnaturally, bad sign. If it vanished too quickly, trouble nearby. And if it moved sideways with no wind, well, the shaman says then the wind is asking you something. You don't ask what. You're not sure you want to know. Instead, you sit a little longer as the shadows fade completely. The sun is higher now. The moment has passed. The shaman stands, brushes snow from their knees, and offers you a small pouch. For later, they say. When there's too much light, you peek inside. Charcoal, bone slivers, a scrap of dyed hide, all tools for casting shadows when none appear naturally. Because even in endless day, the Arctic summer that bathes the world in constant glow, shamans learned how to create darkness, just enough to speak with the wind again. As you walk back to camp, pouch in hand, you find yourself squinting at every flicker, every reflection, every movement across the snow. Suddenly, shadows feel less like absence and more like language. The fire crackles low tonight, its warmth barely reaching your fingers. You sit cross-legged beneath a canopy of stitched hides, stars glinting through gaps in the seams. The wind outside is slower now, almost purring like it's sleeping with one eye open. The shaman sits across from you, bone beads clicking softly as they prepare a new tool, not for casting or calling, but for hearing. It's a drum, but not like any you've seen. Oval-shaped, made from stretched caribou skin and driftwood bent with steam, its surface is etched with runes so faint they seem to shift in the firelight. The handle is wrapped in fur, the beater tipped with raven feathers. This, the shaman says, is how you talk back to the wind. You raise an eyebrow? I thought the shadows told us what it said. They do. The shaman nods. But sometimes you have to answer, and so begins your lesson in rhythm. Because Arctic shamans didn't just read the wind's voice, they played into it. Like jazz, but frostbitten. They begin slowly. One beat. Pause. Two short beats. Pause. Then a long roll like a wave retreating across pebbles. You mimic it awkwardly, the beater bouncing in your hand. The drum hums faint raw. You try again. This time your pulse joins in. Here's the strange bit: while most cultures drum for celebration or battle, Arctic shamans drummed for information. They believed the wind could change its course based on vibration. That it listened. In one old story, a hunter lost in a whiteout storm used a hollowed fishbone rattle to tap a pattern into the snowpack. 3, long, 1 short, he repeated. Within minutes, the wind shifted and revealed a path. He returned to his village, frostbitten but alive, whispering that the wind had answered with a yes. Historians still argue whether these drumming patterns were based on weather cues or pure survival instinct. But fragments of bone drums have been found in Siberia, Greenland, and Nunavut, many marked with repeating dot motifs scientists still can't fully decipher. Tonight you're tapping out your own? The shaman pauses, listening not to you, but to how the tent reacts. The way the fire flickers, the draft in the seams, your breath curling in rhythm. You're close, they say. You exhale, not even realizing you'd been holding your breath. Again, there's something hypnotic about it now. You're not just keeping time, you're attuning something. Not just the air, but yourself. The drum doesn't echo like wood. It vibrates. You feel it in your chest, in your teeth. The rhythm becomes its own shadow stretched between you and the wind. It's at that moment the shaman tells you about the raven song, a legend passed between nomadic bands whispered only during storms. It goes like this. Once a wind became lost. It had no mountain to push against, no trees to shake, no skin to bite. So it flew in circles, howling with confusion. The people couldn't sleep, couldn't hunt. They begged the raven to intervene. Raven came, sat on a ridge, listened. Then it tapped its talons in a slow rhythm. 1, 1, 2, 1, and the wind, hearing something it recognized, followed. That's why, in some Inuit carvings, raven is shown with one wing dipped, because it's still leading lost winds home. Quirky, sure, but the rhythm works. You ask the shaman if anyone's ever drummed the wrong pattern. They pause. Oh yes. The fire crackles louder. Once a novice tried to calm a hunting wind during birthing season. The wind heard invitation instead of rest, drove the caribou into panic. Half the herd fled the valley, and the novice became a cook, the shaman says without looking up. You both laugh, but it's a quiet laugh, respectful, because you're starting to see how delicate this all is. It's not just about tools or talent. It's about timing. Even the drums can betray you if the wind's not in the mood. You continue practicing until your arms ache. The rhythm slips in and out of you like tide water, sometimes sharp, sometimes shy. The shaman says little, only correcting your grip once or twice. Most of the time, they just listen. It's late when they finally speak again. Tomorrow they say you'll test it. Test it how? You'll read the wind call its name, then wait. For what? The shaman smiles. For whether it answers. That's the unnerving part, isn't it? That the wind might actually answer. You curl up beside the drum wrapped in furs, its shape still warm beside you. Sleep comes slowly, threaded with dreams of feathers and frost shadows that dance without bodies, and a rhythm that starts and stops without warning. And somewhere faint but sure, you hear the echo of your own drumbeat circling like a bird that isn't lost, just waiting to land. The snow begins before dawn, soft as breath, silent as secrets. You wake to a world smoothed over in white, the camp reshaped, the trees muted, and the sky a seamless silver ceiling above it all. The drum lies beside you still, and waiting like a question you haven't asked yet. The shaman's already up. You find them near the slope beyond the ridge, standing motionless beneath the weight of falling snow. They're watching the sky, not the clouds, but something beneath them. Something moving, shifting. It's time, they say. No further explanation. You don't need one. Today's the day you read the wind. Not from a book, not from an app, but from the one thing nobody can fake: a shadow on snow. The shaman hands you a bone needle, long as your finger, carved with 4 notches. Then a shard of polished obsidian, no bigger than a coin. You blink. Tools. Yes, but not like any you've seen. Here's how it works. First, you find a flat patch of snow, untouched, untrampled. You press the needle upright into the ground and place the obsidian beside it, angled, so it reflects the sky. Then you wait for the wind to blow past the needle and cast a shadow. Not a regular one, a dancing one. Because Arctic wind doesn't move in straight lines. It twists. And when that shadow curls like a spiral or bends like a hook, it's not random. Not to them. Historians still argue whether this was early meteorology or ritualized guesswork. But several 18th century explorers documented Inuit shamans using bone sticks and reflective tools to forecast storm movement. Some wrote it off as superstition. Others swore their guides predicted gusts hours in advance with nothing but a stick and the snow surface. You kneel now, hand steady, needle upright, obsidian down, and then the wait. The first gust is light, barely nudging the needle. The shadow flickers a lazy curve. The shaman watches. You note the angle. Next gust, longer, stronger. The shadow stretches left, flutters, then snaps back. Still no words. Then another gust, and the shadow bends at a sharp diagonal, the needle trembling at its base. The obsidian reflects not just sky, but the faint trace of your own silhouette bent beside it. That too matters. Some say the angle of your body in relation to the wind alters the reading. Not because of magic, because of presence. You're not separate from the reading. You're part of it, and suddenly you see it. A second shadow, fainter, curls in from the right, not from the needle, from the snowbank behind you. It hits the main shadow and splits it like a signal intercepting another. The shaman nods. Speak. You hesitate. To the wind. No, they say. To the answer. You take the drum from your side, grip the beater with fingers still stiff from cold, and tap the rhythm you learned last night. 1 beat. Pause. Too short. Pause. A long, slow roll. The shadows shift again. This time the gust comes with a low howl, not angry, just awake. A sound older than language. Your drum hums in your lap, and the wind seems to wrap around the sound, not stop it, but carry it. And that's when you feel it not see feel. The answer. Not in words, not in signs, in temperature. The wind warms. Barely. A breath, but it means everything. In old records, some shamans noted that certain shadow patterns appeared only before coastal storms, always paired with a subtle rise in air warmth. They called these breathing winds. Others claimed the shadow's shape foretold not weather, but mood. If the air was safe, watchful, or trickster mean. Your shadow today, calm, listening, trustworthy. You let the drum fall silent. The shaman crouches beside you and traces the twin shadows in the snow with one finger. You read it, they say, voice low, not perfectly, but honestly. You grin. Now they continue. Can you walk with it? Walk? They nod toward the distant ridge. That way. 20 paces, then stop. Let the wind guide your next turn. You hesitate, but your feet move before your brain catches up. 1 step, then another. Snow crunches. Wind hums. Shadows drift beside you like slow fish beneath clear ice. You reach 20 paces and turn slightly southwest. The air cools again. Wrong way. You turn east 1 pace, then stop. A raven calls above. The warmth returns. There. That's the thing. This isn't GPS. It's gut. The wind reads you as much as you read it. You continue this way. 5 turns, 2 pauses, 1 climb until you reach a ridge. Below, a narrow valley filled with antlers. Caribou. Hundreds. The herd moves like a whisper, barely stirring the snow. The shaman joins you, nodding once. Tomorrow they say we hunt, but tonight you head back to camp, not with proof, not with trophies, but with something better. Confidence. That you've learned the first rule of shadow reading. It's not about knowing where the wind is. It's about trusting where it wants to go and learning how to go with it. The camp is quieter tonight, not silent, but hushed in that expectant way a theater feels just before the curtain rises. You sit near the fire again, hands cupped around a warm bowl of something vaguely meaty, vaguely herbal. The smoke curls gently around your face. Somewhere nearby, a drum pulses slow and low like a heartbeat, remembering it has a rhythm. You glance across the flames. The shaman's not there. Not yet, but someone else is. A woman older maybe, though her eyes seem ageless. She wears a coat of seal fur trimmed with tiny bone discs that rattle softly when she moves. She sees you looking and smiles. You walked the wind today, she says. You nod. Good, she replies. Then tonight we walk the shadows. That isn't metaphor. Not here. She stands. Motions for you to follow. You leave the circle of firelight and head toward the edge of the trees where snow gathers in quiet folds and the darkness thickens into something more textured than absence. She stops and crouches near a boulder slick with ice. She gestures. Look, you do. And at first you don't see it, but then you do. A shadow. Moving. But not from her. Not from you. From the tree. Only there's no wind. No moon. Just a slow pulsing shift. Almost like the tree is breathing. The elders called these soft echoes. She whispers. Shadows that remember motion. You're confused. Of course you are, but also curious. She pulls a strip of hide from her pouch. Inked symbols cover it. Jagged lines, loops, dots. It's not writing, she explains. It's a score. Like music. She nods. Each mark tells me what kind of shadow to find. What to look for. How to stand. She does it now. Kneels. Lays her palm flat on the snow beside the rock. Waits. A shape falls across her fingers, long curved. And she hums. not a tune, a vibration. You feel it before you hear it, a shift in the trees. And then the wind responds. Not violently, not loudly, just answers, like it's saying, yes, I'm here. Historians still argue whether these rituals were early forms of environmental tracking or something more symbolic. Some suggest they were developed to help predict the return of animals' migratory patterns, tied to subtle changes in shadow length and tree sway. Others propose the practice had less to do with survival and more to do with storytelling. You watch as she shifts, slightly adjusting the angle of her fingers. Now watch the snow, she says, and you do. Tiny ridges form, not from footsteps, from air, from breath, and in them a line appears, no wider than a thread, no longer than a finger, but unmistakable, a sign. She traces it with her knuckle. That's our mark, she whispers. She rises. We'll follow it tomorrow. But now you learn to find your own. And she's gone, just like that. You're alone with the snow and the boulder, and a vague sense that the air is waiting. So you kneel, mimic her posture, lay your palm out on the snow, and you wait. At first nothing, then something, a shiver, a ripple of cold like a whisper brushing just behind your ears. You don't hum, not yet, but your breath catches in your throat, and in that held breath you feel it. Motion, not wind, not tree. Shadow, moving like smoke under skin. You exhale slowly, as if afraid a single sound might scare it off. But it lingers, and then you hear a sound you weren't expecting. Laughter, soft, nearby. You turn. The shaman stands just beyond the trees, arms crossed. You saw it, they say. You nod. You didn't chase it. You nod again. Good. They step forward, kneel beside you. Tomorrow you'll learn how to follow. You want to ask follow what? But you already know the answer. Not the wind, not the shadow. The story inside both. Because that's what this is, isn't it? Not science, not superstition. A language, a way of speaking to the world, not with words, but with awareness. The shaman touches your shoulder gently. Come, there's more fire in the kettle. You'll need it. You stand. The snow crunches, the night leans in, and as you walk back toward camp, you realize you're still watching the ground. Not for danger, not for tracks, for shadow. Because once you see it move, you never forget the way it curls and stretches and disappears. Like a question that's already answered itself, and in that dark drifting silence, you know, you're not just a listener now. You're learning how to speak. The next morning, the snow feels different. Less like a surface you walk on, more like a skin stretched tight over something ancient and alive. You rise early, breath fogging the air, and step outside your shelter, just as the sky begins to gray with morning light. No one tells you where to go, but you know. You follow the faint track traced in shadow the night before, still visible barely like a memory the snow hasn't finished forgetting. It twists through the spruce trees, past a half-frozen creek across a ridge where wind whistles between stones. It isn't straight. It doesn't need to be. It's not about speed. It's about rhythm. At the top of the ridge, the shaman is waiting, not sitting, not standing, balanced one foot, planted the other hovering just above the snow surface, arms outstretched, eyes closed. You hesitate, not sure whether to interrupt, but they speak first. Wind leaves no footprints, they say, still not opening their eyes. But it leaves echoes. You nod, though they can't see it. And echoes they add, leave stories, they lower their arms, finally glance your way. Time to learn how to read them. You sit beside them on the ridge. Below, a valley curls in on itself like a sleeping animal. Trees crowd together, their tips shivering in the breeze. A thin mist hovers over the snow, not thick enough to obscure, just enough to paint the world in soft blurs and shimmer. The shaman hands you a strip of fur not to wear, but to hold against the wind. Light, silken. And then they say something that sounds like nonsense. Let the fur become your second eye. You don't ask what they mean. You just wait, and then you see it. Not on the ground, in the air. The fur moves, sure, but not just from the wind. It moves differently, depending on where you hold it. Near your chest, it flicks north. Over your shoulder, south. Above your head, nothing. The shaman speaks. Each height catches a different layer. You have to know which wind you're reading. That's the trick. In the Arctic, the wind isn't just one thing. It's stacked, layered, like a song with verses you can only hear depending on your altitude. Historians still argue whether this wind layer knowledge was scientifically mapped or instinctively learned. Some researchers say early Arctic peoples recognized thermal gradients without knowing the term. Others believe shamans attributed personality to different wind heights, naming them, treating them like spirits. Both might be true, because here the wind has moods. You shift your hand lower. The fur spins clockwise, higher counterclockwise. You're watching it, the shaman murmurs. Now ask it. You blink. They nod. Ask with your body. You kneel. Angle the fur. Turn your shoulder. The wind shifts. And with it, a shadow appears, just one, sliding across the snow from a jagged rock far below. It elongates, stretches toward you, and then vanishes. You look at the shaman. Did you see that? They smile. No, but I heard it. You stare. They shrug. Some people see better. Some people hear better. Some people feel it in their teeth. You laugh. You're not sure if they're joking. They probably are. Probably. You spend the rest of the morning learning the difference between wind watching and wind feeling. Watching is about movement. Feeling is about delay. There's always a lag, they explain, between what the eye sees and what the air means. You learn to track that delay. A twitch of fur, then a branch bends. A shadow curls, then your shoulder prickles. You start to chart it mentally, seconds, milliseconds beats. And slowly, something strange happens. You stop thinking about what the wind is doing. You just know. It's like listening to music and suddenly predicting the next note without trying. By midday, the sky is clear and white-blue. The shadows have shrunk. The wind has softened, but your attention hasn't. You feel electric, like your skin has grown an extra layer of perception. And that's when the shaman tests you. They don't announce it. They just toss something quick, underhanded, into the snow behind you. You don't turn. You point. Exactly where it landed. They nod. You're ready for the whisper stones. You're not sure what that means. But it sounds awesome. Also slightly terrifying. And yet, here's the oddest thing, you're not tired. If anything, you're more awake than you've been in days. This isn't hiking. This is reading. Like a book with invisible ink and pages made of sky. The shaman sits again, brushing snow from a wide, flat rock. They pull out a pouch filled with tiny stones. Each one is etched with a single mark circle, arrow spiral star. They lay 5 in a row. The wind will choose one, they say. How will I know? They grin. You already do. You close your eyes. Feel the air move. Tilt your face to it. Then, without thinking, tap the second stone. The spiral. The shaman smiles. That's the one that means change. You swallow. They tuck the rest away. Keep it, they say, handing you the spiral stone. You'll know when to use it. The sky starts to dim. You both rise. Begin the slow walk back down the ridge wind, curling at your ankles like a loyal dog. And even though the snow is cold, your skin is warm. Because now when you look at shadows, you don't just see darkness. You see a language, a voice, a movement caught mid-thought. And maybe, just maybe, that voice is beginning to speak back. Later that evening, you sit alone beside the hearth, the spiral stone resting in your palm. Its surface is smooth and warm now, not from the fire, but from how long you've been holding it. The flames flicker low, casting jittery shadows along the walls, and the smoke curls upward like it's trying to trace forgotten stories onto the ceiling. It's quiet, but not in a lifeless way. It's the kind of quiet that hums with potential, like a stage before a play begins, or the sky just before it splits open with snow. The shaman reappears, this time not with a lesson, with a story. They settle across from you, bones creaking like tired wood, and unwrap a small bundle from within their coat. Inside are 6 more whisper stones, each carved with a different symbol: a feather, a wave, a jagged crack, a closed eye, a double ring, and a handprint. These, they say softly, are the oldest kinds of writing we know, not because they were written down, but because they were remembered. You ask where they came from. They smile. Not a place, a time. And then the tale begins. You close your eyes and see it unfold. A time before camps, before tribes, when families followed herds and the land itself was the only map, when wind could kill and snow could hide everything, even your own thoughts. In that time, the shamans were not leaders. They were listeners, not to people, but to cold, to silence, to shapes. One such shaman, the story goes, was a woman named Tuliak. She was said to be born without a voice, but with the uncanny ability to hear the air think. She would stand for hours still as a tree, just watching the shadows flicker over stone. People mocked her at first, until the day she pointed to a shadow, made a spiral with her hand, and said nothing. The next day, a blizzard rolled in so fast, it buried 3 tents before the hunters could return. After that, no one laughed. Instead, they watched her shadows, and they began to mimic her gestures. The spiral meant change. The feather meant move lightly. The jagged crack meant go no further. Each was drawn from the way wind shaped shadow spirals for swirling gusts. Feathers for calm drift cracks, for breaks in rhythm. Over time, Tuliak's gestures became a language. Not for everyone, only for those who waited. And even now, hundreds of winters later, her symbols remain etched into stones, not in villages or temples, but in the wild places, under overhangs, on cliff walls, on bones tucked into tree hollows. They're not instructions. They're reminders that the world speaks, just not in sentences. You open your eyes. The fire's lower now. The shaman watches you, their own eyes glassy with reflection. Historians still argue whether people like Tuliak truly existed. Some say the story is metaphor, a personification of early Arctic intuition. Others believe oral traditions carry more truth than modern maps ever will. You right now believe it completely. You ask the shaman how many of the symbols they know. They tap their temple, 32, then their chest. Only 15 live here. You nod. You understand. Some symbols are remembered with the mind. Others must be felt. They hand you the bundle. You can keep the feather. You choose the one etched with a thin arc, almost like a crescent moon flattened by time. What does this one mean, you ask? The shaman tilts their head. That's soft arrival. It's the sign the wind gives when something changes before it announces itself. You glance down. It feels like a warning. They smile gently, or a gift. Depends on whether you're listening in fear or hope. You hold on to that for a while. Then they tell you one last thing before leaving you to rest. No one owns the wind, and no one speaks it fluently. But every now and then, it whispers in your direction. If you don't answer, that's fine. They stand. But if you do, it remembers. You stay up for a while after that, watching the fire reduce itself to embers. Not thinking, not naming, just listening. And just before you fall asleep, you hear something outside, a hush, then a pulse, then a whisper of snow sliding off the roof. It's nothing, or it's everything. You don't check. You just breathe, because the wind doesn't need your eyes, just your stillness. Morning comes with a whisper, rather than a shout. There's no rooster here, no buzzing phone, no clanging bells, just the slow brightening of the snow outside, the light creeping in, as if the sky itself is exhaling. You wake not to sound, but to presence, the kind that settles on your chest like a wool blanket, heavy, calming. You rise, stretch, and pull on the coat the shaman left folded at your feet. It smells of pine smoke and old parchment. Outside, the camp is already stirring. Children run between snowdrifts, trailing long strings tied to feathers that bounce and flutter like little spirits. A woman carries a wooden bowl filled with warm stones, placing them inside a low tent. An elder carves a pattern into a plank of driftwood. Slow rhythmic each line, guided not by ruler or compass, but by breath. The sky is clear, the air is sharp, and in the distance, the mountains crouch like old gods watching from the edge of memory. You walk with quiet steps through the snow, retracing the path from the day before. It's still there, your footprints slightly softened, still holding the shape of your soles. But near the ridge where you stood to watch the horizon, Something's changed. A pattern. 3 long indentations, almost claw-like, curve across the ground in a crescent. At first, it looks like someone dragged a stick, but there are no boot prints nearby, no hands, no paws, just wind. You kneel, running your fingers along the grooves. They dip slightly into the snow, then disappear entirely, as if the wind had stopped halfway through a sentence. The shaman appears beside you again because of course they do. They nod toward the marks. That's today's warning, they say. Or invitation. You wait. They explain. It's called the Claw of Air, a rare shadow drawing that appears only when warm wind meets a descending cold front. It can mean many things: melting, shifting danger, clarity. But always it means change. You ask if it's bad. The shaman shrugs. It's movement. That's all. Historians still argue whether ancient Arctic communities used these markings in a formal way, like a calendar or weather system. Some researchers point to consistent carvings across regions. Others say that interpreting wind shadows was purely intuitive, a form of localized poetry more than science. But the lines remain, on stones, on hides, even on old cave ceilings drawn in soot and ash like constellations flipped upside down. You follow the shaman to the edge of a frozen pond. There they kneel and begin to scatter small flakes of dried moss onto the surface. Slowly, they blow across it once, twice, 3 times. The flakes dance, some curling outward, others spiraling in place. The shaman watches, then taps the ice. You feel that they ask. You do. A faint vibration, a pulse. Not from beneath, but from within the ice. That's the wind, they say. Caught. They explain that wind doesn't vanish when it stops blowing. It embeds itself. In snowbanks, in rock faces, in memory. It leaves behind pressure, warmth, tension marks we don't always see until something cracks. Like the claw, like the spiral, like the stillness before a storm. You ask if all shamans read wind this way. The shaman shakes their head. No. Some use fire. Some use the cracks in drying clay. Some listen to birds or trees. You pause. Then why do you listen to wind? They glance toward the sky where clouds gather like thoughts in slow formation. Because it listens back. It sounds like a riddle, but it doesn't feel like one. You spend the day in quiet observation. You notice how animals angle their bodies when the wind shifts. Foxes facing into it, owls tilting their heads as though measuring its tone. You learn that fish bones left in the snow will sometimes align in a pattern. After a gust, thin ribs, pointing north tails clustering together. You help carve a totem from whale drift and notice how the shavings drift farther depending on what the sky is doing. Sometimes landing neatly in piles, sometimes scattered like stardust. None of this is written down. Not in any book. But it's everywhere if you're paying attention. Just before dusk, you climb the ridge again. This time you bring the spiral stone. You hold it up. It doesn't glow, doesn't hum, but you watch how the light strikes it now. You see how the shadow it casts curls to the left instead of the right. You feel how your breath moves through the cold. And for the first time since arriving, you don't ask what it means. You just feel what it says. That night the sky is brilliant. Not with stars, with movement. The aurora dances overhead in waves of green and violet, like someone up there is playing a flute made of silk and lightning. It ripples, it weaves, it sings, and below the camp gathers. No ceremony, just shared silence. Someone passes you a cup of something warm. The shaman sits beside you, their head tilted slightly toward the sky. You whisper, "What does this mean?" They smile. It means we're alive and paying attention. The next morning, you awaken before the sun. Not because of any sound, there is none, but because something inside you is pulling. As though your breath is tuned to the rhythm of snow, of silence, of expectation. You dress in layers, thick wool and fur-lined boots, then step outside into a world hushed by blue light. The camp is still asleep. Smoke curls slowly from a few chimneys. A reindeer stirs near the tether post, breath steaming in the frozen air. And overhead, the last threads of the aurora retreat westward, like dreams slinking back behind a curtain. Today you're going farther. The shaman meets you near the bone gate, a satchel slung across their back, a long staff in one hand. You nod silently, and the two of you begin the journey. You leave the village behind, snow crunching softly beneath your boots. No trail, no markers, just the shimmer of ice-glazed trees and the occasional crow watching from a branch like it's seen this all before. Your destination, the shaman says, is a place called the Listening Hollow. Sounds cozy. It's not. It's something else. The walk takes hours, but not in the way time normally works. The landscape plays tricks, distances. Stretched trees double back on themselves. Shadows lean the wrong way. You pass a cluster of stones that look like skulls if you squint. At one point, the wind stops entirely, and in that moment, you hear your heartbeat so loudly, it echoes off the trees. Good, the shaman says. You're arriving. You're already here, but you're also not. When the hollow finally appears, it doesn't look like much, just a dip in the land rimmed by ancient birches, and silent as an empty chapel. There are no birds, no rustling, just the feeling that something is watching and listening. The shaman stops at the edge, gestures for you to sit. You lower yourself onto a patch of packed snow and wait. Minutes pass, maybe hours, and then it begins. Not with sound, with pressure, like air thickening. You feel your limbs grow heavier, your breath deeper. A sensation builds behind your eyes, not pain, not dizziness, more like focus, as if your senses are stepping forward and the rest of you is falling away. The shaman raises a hand and points toward the edge of the hollow. There in the snow, a shadow forms, not cast by you, not cast by anything physical, just a long curling snake-like form that stretches across the white, moving slowly. You blink, it remains. You blink again, it shifts. The shaman doesn't explain. They don't need to. This is the rarest reading. The hollow shadow. Legend says it appears only when the wind from three directions collides in absolute stillness. A paradox, a convergence, and when it happens, the wind's memory is visible projected into the world, like ink spilled from an invisible brush here. Historians still argue whether such moments ever occurred outside of oral tradition. Skeptics say it's poetic myth, a metaphor for emotional clarity. But in that moment, sitting cross-legged in a hollow carved by time and quiet, you're not inclined to argue with history. The shadow curls again, and you notice it's forming a pattern. It's the spiral, but not flat. This one is vertical, climbing a nearby tree, like ivy made of ink. You rise without realizing it, drawn forward. The closer you get, the more it seems to shimmer, not physically, but meaningfully, like a word you almost remember, a face from a dream. A chord played in reverse. You reach out, but the shaman stops you, gently placing a hand on your wrist. Don't touch, they whisper. It's not for touching. Instead, they hand you a mirror, small, polished, cold. Look, you lift it, hold it just so, and the spiral reflected in the mirror becomes a circle, closed, whole, a message, a memory. You don't know, but you feel the answer. And that's enough. The wind returns slowly, as if reluctant to rejoin the present. The shadow fades. The hollow loses its hum. You turn to the shaman. What did it mean? They smile. You'll know when you need to. Annoying, yes, but also deeply comforting. Because you realize the journey wasn't to decode the wind, it was to hear it, to feel its presence, its play, its patience. You trek back to the village as the sky lightens. Not with sunrise, but with possibility. By the time you return, the children are up again, their feather strings dancing in the breeze. Someone's boiling something that smells of mushrooms and firewood. A dog howls once, not out of alarm, but as if joining a very old song. You sit beneath the large shadow drum from days ago. This time the markings make sense. The spiral, the claw, the double echo. You trace them with your eyes, matching them to the shapes you saw, the feelings they carried. It's not prophecy, not magic, not madness. It's memory, wind memory, and maybe your own. That night the shaman gives you a gift, a tiny spiral carved into whalebone, suspended on a thread of woven sinew. To remind you, they say, Of what? That not all silence is empty. You nod, slip the pendant over your head, and for the first time in days you dream, not of wind, but of stillness, and how sometimes it carries the loudest messages of all. You wake slowly with that bone spiral still nestled warm against your skin, like a seal left by something ancient and affectionate. The light filtering through the hut's sealskin flap is faint, pearly Arctic morning. You stretch, breathe, and realize the wind has changed again. It carries the scent of pine this time, even though you haven't seen a tree in days. The camp feels softer today, less haunted by riddles, more like a place that knows. People move through it not with urgency, but rhythm, a kind of trust in the air. You follow them as they begin the day's rituals, not grand, not dramatic, just life. A hunter checks his net. A child traces spirals in the frost on the sled. The old woman who carves shadows into bones is whittling in the snow eyes, half closed, humming to a tune that seems older than music. You visit her. Watch for a moment as her blade moves with surprising ease. She's carving a scene simple at first glance until you realize what it is. A shadow curling around a figure seated cross-legged. The hollow. The wind. You. She doesn't look up as she says, "It's already remembering you." And again that strange feeling returns, that maybe here, memory isn't locked in brains or books. It lives in the land in symbols in movement. The wind carries it. Shadows reveal it. That's when you notice the others, not people. Marks, etchings in snow, cuts in bark, arrangements of bones and stones, patterns you once thought were random, but now they whisper. You begin to see them as sentences, soft ones, incomplete ones. Some trail off into nothing like thoughts left unfinished. Others loop back onto themselves like questions no one really wants answered. That evening, a feast is prepared. It's not for you, it's for the wind. The villagers gather in a circle of lanterns and seal oil lamps. No shouting, no toasts, just bowls passed quietly, food laid out on flat stones for the breeze to taste, smoke spiraling gently toward the stars. The shaman appears late, not in robes, not in feathers, just wrapped in wool face, bare to the cold. They sit beside you and offer a cup of something strong, warm, sweet. You sip, then you both listen, and the wind comes, not howling, not sharp, but slow, measured, like a storyteller with time to spare. It brushes your cheek, pulls your hair slightly, and curls around your boots like a pet deciding whether to stay. Then softly it speaks, not in words, in rhythm. The flames shift, the snow dances. You feel it in your sternum, like the thud of a drum. You look to the shaman, they nod. You've heard it now. What did it say, you ask? They smile. You'll know when you need to. Yes, again with that. But this time you understand. Because this isn't a language of answers. It's a language of readiness. The feast ends, the lanterns dim, people drift off like snowflakes. You remain a while longer, hand on the spiral pendant eyes on the horizon. You realize this land doesn't give you prophecy. It gives you orientation. Like wind and shadow, it nudges, suggests, points. And you, well, you've learned to read it, or at least to listen. That night you sleep with the flap open, letting the stars peek in, letting the whispers pass through your dreams like wind through feathers. And as you drift off, you hear a voice not loud, not strange, just yours, repeating what you now believe. Not all omens are seen. Not all signs are heard. Some are felt, in your ribs, in the snow, in the quiet curl of a shadow at dawn. Let the rhythm slow now. Let the Arctic wind soften to a breath in your ear, gentle and round. The story is quiet now. The drums are stilled. The shadows have curled back into the trees. And you are weightless in this moment, carried not on wings, but on the hum of memory. Let yourself drift deeper, like snow settling on pine needles, like breath slipping through a half-closed doorway. You're safe here, not because nothing stirs, but because everything that stirs is listening with you. Your body becomes the shape of rest. Your hands empty, your mind no longer seeking, but simply floating. The echoes of the journey remain, yes, but they've settled now into the spiral of your spine, into the hush behind your eyes. There's no need to remember every detail. The wind remembers for you. The shadows carry your story now, not for telling, just for holding. So breathe in gently. Let it fill the corners of your chest. Feel how even your stillness has rhythm. You've walked with shamans, slept beside silence, sat beneath stars old enough to have forgotten their own names. That is enough. That is more than enough. So let your thoughts nest like birds in soft branches. Let the sky fold over you. And sleep. Just sleep. The snow will wait. The wind knows your name. And the story is still listening. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Maybe by now you've already drifted off to sleep. And if so, we hope this story brought you peace of mind and helped you rest a little easier. Deep sleep makes life better, and we're truly happy to be part of that. Until next time, sweet dreams.